In our headlines on this Monday afternoon, June 26th, here in South Korea. Korea is on alert amid the start of its annual monsoon season, with rain drenching the nation overnight and more downpours expected later on this Monday and over the next few days. And Seoul's education ministry is set to share a detailed plan on tackling excessive expenditure on private tutoring by eliminating the so-called killer questions from the National College entrance examination. Meanwhile, a rather dramatic display of division between the Wagner Group and Moscow this past weekend ended as abruptly as it began, with the paramilitary organization halting its hostile advance into Russia. We start with the latest on the weather front as Korea's annual monsoon season makes landfall, with heavy rain expected to keep the nation mostly wet this week. Our Shin Ha-young reports.
The monsoon season has begun in South Korea, with Jeju Island and the southern regions the first to be hit by torrential downpours. The Korea Meteorological Administration has forecasted that starting late afternoon Monday and continuing overnight, there will be heavy rainfall of 20 to 40 millimeters per hour in the Seoul metropolitan area. Rainfall exceeding 15 millimeters per hour is considered heavy rain, and at 20 millimeters per hour, it's hard for people to even see what's in front of them. This afternoon, rainfall of 40 to 60 millimeters per hour is predicted for southern regions. Expected precipitation until tomorrow is 30 to 100 millimeters in the Seoul metropolitan area in Chungcheon region and 50 to 150 millimeters in Jeju. Rainfall is expected to weaken after tomorrow, but it's likely we'll see more rain throughout this week. The country's Central Disaster and Safety Countermeasure Headquarters has issued a Level 1 response, the lowest of 3 levels of action that can be taken during a natural disaster. It has also raised the alert level from interest to caution. This comes as a heavy rain alert issued on Jeju and southern regions on Sunday was expanded to Chungnam and Jeonbuk provinces in the early hours of Monday morning. In order to prevent casualties and damage, the government is advising people to stay away from streams and rivers that are prone to flooding. They should also refrain from visiting mountainous regions that are vulnerable to landslides. According to the presidential office on Monday, President Yoon is working in emergency mode to monitor possible damage caused by heavy rain. On Saturday, the president instructed relevant authorities to thoroughly prepare for damage, such as flooding in below ground-level homes. In response, authorities have instructed that swift evacuation is needed in case of flooding in places such as basement and underground parking lots. Shin Ha-young, Arirang News.
As part of broader efforts to tackle excessive expenditure on private tutoring, Seoul's education ministry is poised to make public a detailed plan that will ban questions on material not covered in the school curriculum. The move comes 5 months ahead of Korea's college scholastic ability test, better known as Suneung, and authorities today will share examples of the so-called killer questions from past papers and ways to keep the test tough without compromising its validity. President Yoon urged for a fair Suneung that keeps those privileged from resorting to cram schools for crucial tutoring. Also, inspections of cram schools nationwide will seek to crack down on any related illegality. Food prices, especially those of Korea's ramyeon, are soaring, and both the government and the public are calling for a cap on costs. Our Lee Soo-jin has more.
Trips to the supermarket are putting a dent in consumers' wallets as food prices continue to rise. According to Statistics Korea on Monday, prices of ramen during the first quarter of 2023 surged more than 12%, the highest in 15 years since the 2008 global financial crisis. In September last year, South Korea's #1 instant noodle company by sales, Nongshim, raised its prices by more than 11%. This was followed by price hikes that reached nearly 10% for another major instant noodle maker, Palto, and 11% for Ottugi just 1 month later. And with international wheat prices now around 50% lower than they were when those companies hiked prices, Finance Minister Chu Kyung-ho appeared on TV screens last week where he urged ramen companies to lower instant noodle prices. Consumers have also begun to voice their complaints as ramen in South Korea is considered to be an affordable staple food. But the increase in food prices has already surpassed the increase in disposable income during the first quarter. Data from Statistics Korea shows that average monthly disposable income rose 3.4% compared to the 12% rise in consumer prices of ramen. Other affordable supermarket items such as snack foods surged more than 13% and ice cream nearly 12% over the same period. The rise in the price of ice cream is also the highest since the second quarter of 2009. The price increase for bread fell slightly, but remained high at 14.3% in the first quarter after passing 15% during the first quarter of last year. And with lower grain prices apparently not yet impacting prices on the shelves, consumers will be hoping for cheaper staple food items in the second half of the year. 이수진, Arirang News.
In other news, Korea ranks 17th worldwide for logistics performance, according to the World Bank's Logistics Performance Index, which measures a country's ability to move goods across borders with speed and reliability. Korea made it onto the top 20 for the first time. It follows other Asian counterparts like Singapore, which tops the list, and Hong Kong, which ranks 7th, and Japan as well as Taiwan in 13th place. Korea witnessed notable scores for customs performance coming in 7th and logistics infrastructure at 9th amid its AI-based procedures and upgraded facilities. In the Middle East this past weekend, Korea's Hyundai Engineering and Construction sealed a deal worth $5 billion with state oil producer Aramco for a petrochemical plant in Saudi Arabia. Our Moon Hye-ryun has details.
South Korea's construction orders in the Middle East are booming. According to the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport, South Korean construction firm Hyundai Engineering and Construction signed a major petrochemical plant construction contract on Saturday with Saudi Arabia's Aramco. The $5 billion project is the largest order a South Korean company has won from Saudi Arabia to date, bringing the total of overseas construction orders in the first half of the year to $13.7 billion. This tops the $12 billion recorded in the first half of last year. Hyundai E&C will be responsible for the construction of a mixed feed cracker plant to produce ethylene as well as storage and support facilities. South Korea came out on top despite the fierce competition with the Infrastructure Ministry's formation of the One-Team Korea Support Team for overseas orders and the diplomatic meeting between the minister and Aramco CEO back in March. The South Korean government has been concentrating its efforts on partnerships with Middle East nations in various fields such as defense, IT, and renewable energy, as well as petrochemicals as it looks to improve its weakened exports following the global economic downturn. To keep up this momentum, experts say that cooperation between companies will be crucial.
In order to put the trade balance and overseas construction orders in the black, South Korean companies will need to share relevant information to prevent cutthroat competition in its diversifying market.
President Yoon Suk-yeol commented on Sunday that this latest endeavor will strengthen economic cooperation between South Korea and Saudi Arabia. Moon Hye-ryun, Arirang News.
And Korean beauty products are expanding in the Vietnamese market. According to the Korean Cosmetic Association, exports to Vietnam between January and May this year amounted to some $187.6 million. Now, this ranks Vietnam 5th after China, the US, Japan, and Hong Kong. While Vietnam's ranking remains unchanged from the same period last year, its rate of growth has been the strongest, up 43.4%. That being said, Vietnam now accounts for 5.6% of Korea's market share for cosmetic exports. President Yoon Suk-yeol is back home, having ended a week-long diplomatic trip that began in France and ended in Vietnam last week. That being said, our senior presidential office correspondent Oh Soo-young touches upon the broader implications of his latest agenda overseas. To take a listen.
Multilateralism was at the heart of President Yoon Suk-yeol's diplomatic week in France and Vietnam, as he set out to deepen South Korea's economic and security ties with key regional players. In expanding Korea's network, experts say broader cooperation is crucial to South Korea's future security and prosperity, especially amid trade uncertainty and geopolitical rivalry between the United States and China.
Korea's global outreach should cover a wide range of countries, including core middle power countries that have high visibility in global affairs. European Union carries substantial importance, especially with the global governance agenda such as international law, climate change, as well as multilateral diplomacy. The European Union also considers seriously about the China issues, but has shown more inclusive stance toward the region.
In this regard, strengthening ties with France, along with Germany a month ago, was an important move as they are both heavyweight countries in the EU. The same goes for Vietnam. Yoon said he hopes Seoul-Hanoi ties will be a gateway for stronger relations with the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, one of the fastest-growing regions in the world and crucial for stabilizing the Indo-Pacific region, where key maritime routes facilitate global trade. Showing support for ASEAN's role in regional peace and prosperity, Seoul pledged an extra $2 billion funding for Vietnam's development and further cooperation to build sustainable infrastructure, including smart cities and LNG production. In fact, pitching South Korea as a platform for developmental know-how and assistance. Yoon's speech in Paris to boost Korea's bid to host the World Expo 2030 in the city of Busan stood out, as he collaborated with K-pop sensations Psy and aespa's Karina. Chaebol leaders, including the heads of Samsung, LG, SK, Lotte and Hyundai, also did their part.
Topics like, for example, transition in ecology, human rights, opening to the world. These are areas where I believe the world is expecting Korea to speak. And it could be a great opportunity not only to show that people, visitors will come to Korea, will enjoy Busan, but that Korea can bring a further contribution and take a greater engagement in dealing with these topics through the Expo.
By highlighting Seoul's role in promoting sustainable high-tech solutions to global issues. Experts say Yoon's streak of diplomacy comes as he paves the way to make Korea a global pivotal state, as a growing contributor and shaper of international relations. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
73 years ago this past Sunday, that is June 25th, war broke out on the Korean peninsula. And in memory of this sad occasion, President Yoon Suk-yeol said neither the devastation caused by the war nor the veterans from South Korea and the US should be forgotten. The remarks were shared at a special exhibition to mark the 70th anniversary of the ROK-US alliance at the National Museum of Korean Contemporary History. President Yoon also pledged to continue the search for the remains of the 120,000 Korean and 7,500 American soldiers from the war. He also underscored the importance of informing future generations about the foundation of the alliance, as they are the key to maintaining it. The alliance was formed in October 1953 with the signing of the ROK-US Mutual Defense Treaty after the Korean War. A potential confrontation between the Wagner Group and the Russian government was reportedly averted by Belarus this past weekend. Our Lee Seung-jae explains.
After Wagner fighters had captured the Russian city of Rostov and came within 200 kilometers of Moscow, tensions de-escalated on Saturday as peace talks began. Citing Belarusian news agency VLT, Reuters reported that Russian President Vladimir Putin spoke with Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko for the third time in 2 days on Sunday. The talks come as Lukashenko apparently brokered a deal with the leader of the Wagner militia group to end a rebellion. In exchange, the Wagner group halted its approach to Moscow on Saturday and instead withdrew to Belarus. And despite saying that those who had taken part in the armed insurrection would be punished, as part of the agreement, the Wagner chief will face no action from the Kremlin. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said Sunday that the brief mutiny by Wagner shows cracks in Russian President Vladimir Putin's role as a leader of the country.
So I think this is clearly, we see cracks emerging. This has been a devastating strategic failure for Putin across virtually every front, economic, military, geopolitical standing.
China also responded to the weekend's unrest, saying that it continues to support the efforts of the Russian leadership in stabilizing the situation. China's foreign ministry went on to add that the recent escalation in tensions in Russia was Moscow's internal affairs. Meanwhile, according to the Wall Street Journal, the U.S. has decided to keep current sanctions against the Wagner Group in place. This comes as the U.S. was initially going to add more sanctions against the militia group in relation to an ongoing mineral-related business in Africa, but that has been put on hold. Experts say the U.S. doesn't want to appear to be taking sides, making it clear that Washington does not support either the Russian government or the Wagner Group. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
On the football field this past Sunday, Team Korea defeated Thailand 4-1 in the quarterfinals of the Under-17 Asian Cup to advance into the semifinals. This means Korea has secured a pass to the Under-17 World Cup as well. The young Taeguk Warriors scored twice in the first half and twice in the second half to take the game from Thailand. Yoon Do-young and Kim Myung-jun were both on the score sheet and shared the lead for the most goals scored in the tournament with 4. Korea faces the winner of the Saudi Arabia and Uzbekistan match in the semifinals on Thursday. Aging is a natural part of life, and doctors say there are habits that help to make the process more healthy. Now, these habits are no secret, and our Kim Jung-sil takes time to remind us.
From early in the morning, Professor Shin Jin-young is busy looking after patients. She and her research team at Konkuk University Medical Center recently found out that there are certain characteristics of aging shared by Korean people.
For people in South Korea, it's vital that one has physical and mental stability. And recently, we found out that social interaction within the community is very important for one's aging. This is not just in South Korea, but also in other Eastern Asian countries.
Professor Shin said simply eating together with neighbors could help senior citizens reduce depression and anxiety. Speaking of eating, though, what should we eat? And the answer is eat less.
The excess amount of calories we consume makes fat build up in our liver. That's why I tell my patients to generally eat a little bit less if possible.
Another key factor for healthy aging, exercise.
At around 70 years of age, our muscles decline about 20% from when we were in our 30s. We also naturally gain body fat and become insulin resistant. And the only way to avoid these changes known so far is through exercising.
Here at the Konkuk University Sports Medical Center, many people are exercising in the early morning. Kim Dong-hyun has been working out for about a year.
I'm exercising to stay healthy, and my body feels lighter and younger after working out.
Other than eating healthy and socializing, experts say physical exercise can also improve cognitive function. One of the world's most renowned experts in healthy aging, Dr. Charles Brenner, recently visited South Korea and said it's important to keep our feet on the ground when it comes to anti-aging.
There's some people that have some unrealistic expectations that they're not going to age at all. I don't think that that's realistic, but I think that you can age better.
He added that mom's advice is the key, meaning good nutrition, good physical and mental activity, social engagement, and avoiding smoking, drinking, and overeating. Kim Jung-sil, Arirang News.
Let's take a look at what's going on in the world now. In Greece, parliamentary elections over the weekend saw the country's ruling party win an outright majority. According to official results on Sunday from almost 96% of voting centres, the conservative New Democracy Party clinched just over 40% of the vote, giving them 158 seats in the 300-seat parliament. The party's leader, Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis, had called the election to try to win that majority after falling a few seats short in a previous election in May. The sitting PM ran on a platform of increasing salaries, reducing inequality, and providing better and free public health care. Moving over to Sweden, one person has died and 9 others were injured on Sunday after a roller coaster derailed. 3 of the wounded are in serious condition. According to eyewitnesses at the Gröna Lund amusement park in Stockholm, riders on the Jetline roller coaster were sent to the ground after it partly came off its tracks. There were 14 people on board at the time. The 140-year-old park has been closed while the police conduct an investigation into the crash. The Jetline ride has a top speed of 90 kilometers per hour and reaches a maximum height of 30 meters. In the US state of California, human remains have been found in an area where a British actor went missing half a year ago. According to reports, a group of hikers on Saturday morning discovered the remains in the San Gabriel Mountains near Mount Baldy. Actor Julian Sands went missing there in mid-January while hiking in bad weather. The remains have been handed over to the local coroner's office and identification is expected to be complete by next week. Sands is best known for roles in the Oscar-winning film A Room with a View and The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. He also appeared in TV dramas, including 24 and Smallville. And finally, the world's ugliest dog has been crowned. Meet Scooter, a 7-year-old hairless Chinese-crested canine. The pup was given this year's title on Friday at the world's ugliest dog contest in Petaluma, California. Scooter has an almost permanent droopy tongue that hangs outside his mouth and was born with deformed back legs. But he manages to get by using his 2 front legs. According to judges, it was Scooter's uniqueness and charm that won them over. Held annually, the contest showcases dogs that have defied adversity and aims to promote adoption. Second place was taken by a 7-year-old Pekingese called Wild Fang, while third was claimed by a Chihuahua estimated to be 17 years old. Matthew Ashley, Arirang News.
Good afternoon. The monsoon season began a few days later than usual nationwide, and usually southern regions are hit with monsoon rain first, but that's not the case this year. Heavy rain is soaking the country and expect to see heavier rain in the commuting hours with up to 100 millimeters of rain in the forecast in central regions until Tuesday. Meanwhile, Jeju Island could see up to 200 millimeters with a strong wind advisory being in place. Well, Sunday was a super muggy one with unbearable heat and humidity. But today, along with showers, most regions are having heat relief this afternoon. Top readings going down 1 to 7 degrees lower than yesterday afternoon. Afternoon highs in most parts are in the mid-20s. Daegu at about 27, Daejeon at 25 degrees this afternoon. Now, monsoon rain is forecasted all through the week with short breaks in between in central regions during the day. So please keep an umbrella handy. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
That ends our Monday afternoon newscast. Thank you for watching, and do stay tuned for our panel session coming up right after this break.
있지 않은가요? 처음 태어난 이별에서 사는 우리 손잡아요.
Greetings, everyone. My name is Federico Cuello. I am the ambassador of the Dominican Republic in the Republic of Korea. Arirang is the one channel in which ambassadors have a say. Ambassadors' opinions are taken into consideration. Ambassadors can promote what they are doing. I am truly grateful to be asked to speak for Arirang. I hope Arirang continues and Diplomat Talks continues as well, because really it is the one window in my 6 postings as ambassador I have found to speak about my work and to speak about those issues that are of relevance for the Dominican Republic and for Korea. And I look forward to coming back as many times as possible during the remaining time I have here in Korea, resonating with the world with Arirang.
If you want to know more about Korean performances and arts, follow me right now.
Loved and watched around the world. We want to make more animations to reach more children. Traveling time and space. Developing adventure and curiosity. Infinite creativity and hope. We want our children to grow up to be happy. Animation, watched by children all around the world. So that joy can be felt when our animation is watched. This is the reason we make animation and share with the world. K-Animation, befriending children all over the world.
A study by Soar's Family Ministry shows 1 out of 10 teenagers has used a fentanyl patch, a form of painkiller, with some 95% having received a prescription for the patch and over 9% claiming to have purchased it second-hand. Meanwhile, U.S. authorities have indicted 4 Chinese companies and 8 of their workers on charges of selling crucial chemicals used by Mexican cartels to manufacture fentanyl. So what is fentanyl and why are officials in Korea and the U.S. cracking down on it? Is substance abuse on the rampant rise among teenagers? And how are governments seeking to fight drug abuse? Welcome to Issues and Insiders. Today, that is June 26, we mark the United Nations International Day Against Drug Abuse and Illegal Drug Trade. And for more on this reality here and elsewhere, I have Professor Kim Moon-gyu from Yonsei University here in the studio with me. Professor Kim, it's a pleasure to have you back.
Thank you for having me.
I also have Professor Peter Chin-hong at the University of Southern California, San Francisco, live on the line. Professor Chin-hong, it's good to see you again.
Nice to see you again, Sunny.
Right, Professor Chin-hong, let's begin with some crucial information then about fentanyl. What is it and why is it the leading cause of death, I believe, for Americans aged between 18 and 49?
Well, Sunny, fentanyl is a synthetic opioid. It's a pain medication, essentially, that can cause people to become have less pain or experience less pain, but also increase sleepiness or somnolence, and that also depresses the need to breathe. It's part of what we call a third wave of drug use in recent times in the United States. The first wave, of course, was the rapid increase in use of OxyContin, which is a prescription opioid, with or without the involvement of pharmaceutical companies like Sacklers. The second is the resulting heroin use or epidemic that because people are addicted to these painkillers. And now with fentanyl, that's called the third wave of substance use. It's really because it's easy to manufacture. It can be mixed in with lots of other generic medications that lots of people can buy on the street, essentially, and sort of like distributed by drug cartels, many times in Central America, Mexico, using raw materials from China and raw materials from India.
Right, I see. And also here in Korea, Professor Kim, data claims that 1 out of 10 Korean teenagers has reportedly used a fentanyl patch here in the country. First of all, when are these patches prescribed by Korean doctors, and why has its prescription been on a tangible rise in recent years?
Well, fentanyl patches are mostly prescribed for severe cancer pain or pain after major operations, like a big operation which causes a huge pain. So used to prescribe them for those patients. And when I took care of the oncology patients, I also used the fentanyl patch, and it was quite effective because you put it on your skin, the effect continues for 72 hours. So if a patient is well adapted to that kind of medication, we can use less painkillers, which is given by intravenous injection. So that was a very good drug. It is quite strong compared to heroin. It's about 50 to 100 times stronger than heroin, and you can say it's about 200 times stronger compared to morphine. In Korea, we have a DUR system, which means a drug utilization review. And as all of the clinics are interconnected with web-based data, doctors can recognize whether fentanyl patch was prescribed in a previous visit, or if the patient visited other clinic before they came in front of the doctor. So is it because of we have more cancer patients, or is it because we have more major operations with these pain control? I'm not sure about that. And I really don't want to believe that 1 out of 10 students are already exposed to fentanyl patches. So we have to monitor, we have to control this kind of drugs. It should not be prescribed without caution, prescribed in every private clinic. So now we have
the DUR system, drug utilization review, I think it's time that if you are to prescribe that fentanyl patch, you better open that system. You know, it's very difficult. It takes time. So if the doctor is busy, he might miss that time. But we have to open that DUR and check whether the patient had another prescriptions of fentanyl patches.
Right, so monitoring will be very crucial there. Professor Chinong, beyond fentanyl, I understand the overdose of sleeping pills and antidepressants is also fueling much concern in the US. Could you tell us a bit more?
Yes, so Sunny, there are two issues, and mainly because of drug interactions. And people might remember Heath Ledger, who died several years ago. It was because of these drug interactions, because if you take one drug and there is an interaction with another drug in the same area of the brain or with some neurotransmitters, that can increase the risk of dying, increase the risk of overdose. So let's take sleeping pills, for example. Some clinicians diagnose benzodiazepines, pills like Valium or Ativan or Xanax for sleeping aids. There are also non-benzodiazepine sleeping aids. Studies have shown, particularly one large one at the end of last year, published in the Journal of the American Medical Association, or JAMA, showing that if individuals were prescribed these kinds of benzodiazepines like Valium, that increase the risk of overdose if the patient use other opiates like fentanyl, like OxyContin. So it is a very significant issue. When you look at another class of drugs like antidepressants, you get an increase in overdose for a different reason, and that is because of a kind of drug interaction that occurs because if you take, say, an antidepressant like a SSRI, like some of them like Prozac, for example, it may inhibit some of the enzymes that can metabolize some of the opioids. So if you take one pill of an opioid, it's almost like taking two pills because it's metabolized less efficiently when you take one of these antidepressants. So in that sense, it's also a drug interaction, but you're not intentionally overdosing. It's the same dose you're taking, but when you take the antidepressant and the opioid at the same time, you have much higher levels of the opioid. And one study has shown that that can increase the risk of overdose by about 25%. So whenever you prescribe multiple drugs, that can increase the risk of overdose, particularly in the case of illegal acquiring of the opioid. So say you're a clinician prescribing one of these benzodiazepines, or you're prescribing a antidepressant, you may not know that your patient is getting opioids, maybe illegally, and that can increase the risk of overdose that way. Other than that, many illegal manufacturers are also selling fake benzodiazepines like Valium or Ativan, but they're also increasing the use of fentanyl as filler. In the old days, you used to use baby milk powder, but it's actually cheaper to use fentanyl and it's more popular. But you can imagine that if you use a very non-standard dose of fentanyl and opioid with the benzodiazepine and the pill that you're thinking it's Valium, that has also been associated with overdoses. So for multiple reasons, both prescription drugs as well as those acquired from the streets, having all of these drugs available can lead to deadly outcomes. And in fact, we're seeing that.
Right, we really are. And Professor Kim, generally speaking, what can you tell us about the need for and risk of psychotropic drugs?
Psychotropic drugs are medications that alter mood, perception, and behavior, particularly when it used combination with psychotherapy. Those psychotropic drugs can be powerful tools in managing conditions such as borderline personality disorder or anxiety, depression, bipolar disease, and schizophrenia. And it's the most common reason the teenagers get this drug is because of depression. And if one drug is not effective, you have to add more, sometimes even 5 or 6 kinds of medications at once. And when I was in training, I used to see drug intoxications, but they usually take only one kind of drug, such as Tylenol. But nowadays, I see many teenagers visiting emergency room because they took many kinds of pills for many days. So we have to add all those toxicity together and to find out what kind of complication they might have for their organs, such as liver, kidney, and heart. I would say that the most serious complication will be the heart complication, which is very urgent, and sometimes you need a special consultation and administration for that. So why are those teenagers taking that drugs? It is very complicated to answer. I see that it's very ambivalent, you know. Nobody wants to die, but if I ask them, why did you take this? And they say, I want to die. But actually they don't want to die. So they come to the emergency room. They even call doctors that they took some medications and intoxicated. I hope that this phenomenon should subside, but I'm a bit worried that this kind of phenomena might go into a more deadly intoxications with substance such as opioids.
Right, hopefully not though, right? Professor Chinong, how severe, before we go forward then, how severe is substance abuse in the US?
It's really at a crisis level now, Sunny, in the United States. It's been increasing every year, and it was fueled by the pandemic. So to put things in perspective, about every 5 minutes, one person in the United States is dying of a drug overdose, which is leading to lots of years of lost productivity at work, disruption of families. So it's really permeated all levels of society. In the last year alone, about 110,000 people died of drug overdoses in the United States. About 2/3 or more than 2/3 of this was due to fentanyl. And for many reasons that I described, we're seeing much more fentanyl on the streets right now because, again, it's easy to manufacture, it's cheap, it's easy to get. You don't need a lot of complicated equipment like needles. And it's very much underground, hard to detect. So that's kind of what we're seeing in terms of the impact in the United States. And again, permeating all levels of society. I think that the emergency rooms are flooded. There's a mix with substance use and, of course, mental disorders like depression, anxiety. They can amplify each other. We've seen and I've treated lots of patients with the consequences of substance use in the hospital setting, like lots of skin infections, heart valve infections, like Dr. Kim talked about, is costing society a lot of money. It's leading to a lot of premature deaths. When we think about substances, it's not just fentanyl, of course, although that's probably the most underground right now and the least understood. We can't forget about one that's legal and sold very widely, which is alcohol. And in the United States, for example, there are millions of people who have alcohol use disorder, and that also leads to liver failure, premature death, and need for transplantation. So it's a very, very complicated system right now, but it is, affecting all levels of our society, including a sharp increase in children and adolescents.
Right. It's interesting how you mentioned alcohol abuse, because that's something that Professor Kim mentioned prior to the start of our program. And that being said, what have you been exposed to further, that is, within the emergency room with regard to substance abuse here in the country?
I would say that now we live in a global village. So in many cases, problems of neighboring countries become a problem of Korea. And I think it might be different from the United States, but in Korea we have 5 common substance abuse. The first one is opioids and its derivatives. Second one, methamphetamine, which is also known as philopone. The third one is ketamine. And as Professor Ching-Wong mentioned, benzodiazepine comes to the fourth place. And the final one is MDMA, which is also known as ecstasy. And yes, in emergency room, we see all kinds of patients, alcohol intoxication, bond inhalation, and gasoline, etc. So sometimes I see a patient complaining whole body pain. So we check the patient, and there's no specific reason for that kind of symptom. And we have a very difficult time to deal with those patients. It might be a very serious one or something related to some substance abuse. When I was in training, I sometimes, when I was on duty in the emergency room, I meet patients complaining headache or back pain or leg pain, whatever. And he's like an actor. He expresses his symptoms very precisely, make the doctor feel like that, oh, this is a real pain. But soon a nurse comes by and she tells me that this patient visits the emergency room every night. And if he was, if everybody knows that he's a substance abuser, he changed the hospital to the next city. So they wander the whole Korea to get the medication he wants. And at the time, usually it's used morphine or Demerol or something like that. But fentanyl is not like that. It's much more stronger and much more easy to get intoxicated. In Korea, as I mentioned, we have a DUR, Drug Utilization Review. So those addicted patients can no more try to wander around to find a new doctor to prescribe those medications. But this DUR system is not a perfect one. There might be some shortcomings that the addictors might find out and try to get the drugs they want.
Right, which is why we need to upgrade the system, as you said earlier.
Yes.
Then. Professor Ching, quite a number of US states, meanwhile, have legalized marijuana. What have been the broader implications of this particular reality?
Yes, Sunny. So that's a complicated question. So about 10 years ago, Colorado became the first state in the United States to legalize not just medical marijuana, which was around for some time, but also recreational cannabis use. So the promise is, let's legalize it. We will probably have a lower chance of having an underground black market trade. It will be out in the front. Maybe we'll have fewer kids using it because it will be harder to get illegally because everyone can get it legally now. And it will also provide revenue to different states. So now 10 years later, people have looked at the Colorado experience, and in the meantime, about 21 out of the 50 states have legalized both recreational and medical marijuana, 36 states in general for medicinal marijuana. And let's look at the data so far. So in terms of people using, it did increase from about 12% of the population to about 20% of the population. It's unclear whether or not more kids are using it. It seems that in the most recent data, fewer high school, middle school students are using cannabis. In terms of drunk driving, there have been more people trained to detect cannabis use after driving, and that has increased, but we're not sure if it's because more people are trained to detect whether or not somebody's on cannabis as a result of impaired driving. But it did result in about $2 to $3 billion of revenue to Colorado. I would say that right now, most Americans are in support of legalization of cannabis, about 9 in 10 Americans. But particularly if you're younger and if you're Democrat-leaning, you're supporting this. But the vast majority of the population has supported it. whether or not it's resulting in exactly all of the benefits that we hope that it result in, I think it's still under analysis. One other aspect that we've seen, of course, is the result of accidental overdoses in children and more visits to the emergency room from having cannabis at home, particularly if it's in the shape of brownies or gummies, which can look like candy to children. So we need to do a lot more education, but make no doubt about it, cannabis is big business right now in the United States.
Right, I see. Meanwhile, back here in Korea, Professor Kim, how worried should we be about the presence of drugs among our teenagers?
We have a data from 2022, and they say that more than 42,000 cases of substance abuse in Korea, and among them, the teenagers are 1,290 cases. And if we look at the male-female ratio, it's about 70 to 30%. But if we limit that cases only to the teenagers, it becomes 60 to 40. And if we make it more narrow to less than 15 years of age, it becomes the reverse. I mean, more females are found compared to males. I don't know why, but that's the pattern of teenager substance abuse. And the kind of abuse, kind of substance are also different. If you look at the female, methamphetamine is the first one, followed by ketamine and opioids. And the males are different. The benzodiazepine comes at the first, followed by opioids and methamphetamine. Well, in this data, fentanyl is not shown exactly. It's just under the criteria of opioids, but I'm sure that it's hidden and it's going to be a huge problem in the future if we do not do something. And some say that the third dose of fentanyl might end up in addiction. So if addicted at teenage, it's the worst scenario. Everything in his life is going to change in a very bad way. So this kind of substance abuse is going to proceed in a very fast velocity. So we have to be very proactive to fight against this one.
Right, which is when the Yoon administration itself has announced a crackdown on drugs this year and going forward, of course. All right, Professor Kim, as always, thank you very much for your time and your thoughts.
Thank you.
And Professor Chin Hong over in the US, thank you so much for your insights.
Thanks so much, Sunny.
Right, well, that ends Monday's edition of Issues and Insiders. Thank you for watching. See you same time tomorrow. That is Tuesday.
Hello,